All right, this is round 3 of going live. I have a very good question from a sales agent, a loan officer actually, who worked at a company that I coached, I think a little over 3 years ago. And he asked a very sincere question. I wasn't aware of what he was going through at the time with his family financially. And this is kind of the cool thing about being able to help people level up the game. One of the things I've learned over the course of my coaching career is not just business related. It's that you never know what people are going through in their personal lives behind the scenes when you're mentoring them. And so I take that into consideration with every office that I walk into. 5 offices today. I see some of my friends and people jumping in right now. What's up, people? And the question that he asked had to do with scripting, which is very interesting because I was thinking that somehow the algorithm would reach out to people and somebody would have brought this question up who's already worked with me possibly over the past couple of years about scripting. Most sales agents hate scripts because it doesn't flow well for them. It kind of takes them out of their natural character. And I'm going to talk about that and why the scripts that I have taught myself through research, development, science, psychology, all kinds of stuff, right? Experience, intuition, working with hundreds of companies, or let's just say dozens of sales teams. Some of the secrets that I've captured and have used to write scripts that have helped to double and triple a lot of people's incomes. Now, by the way, these are some people that have been in sales for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. There's actually some videos of some of these people on the website, joesemaan.com, saying, I've been in sales for 10 years, 15 years. I've been through all kinds of different trainings. I've worked in 4 industries. How the hell was I able to triple my income within a month or 2? And it's not difficult at all. So I'm ready and willing to answer any questions that I see pop up on the screen. I'll keep my eyes on it. I'm also recording this on another camera to go up on the YouTube channel, Stronger, Smarter, Richer. If those of you haven't seen it yet, or you really don't want to subscribe to a bunch of channels, but you do have an interest in some of the topics that I cover and some of the light, important topics that I've already dropped on there with other guests and whatnot, go ahead and check it out tonight. And so I'm going to dive right into this scripting thing while we have time, because I'm only on here for about 30 minutes or so. I have another appointment at 7 p.m. To do some one-on-one coaching. However, one of the problems with scripting, and this is why so many companies find it so difficult to get people to follow their script, is because most companies have written scripts that were somebody's selling style. Number one, a manager, a owner, the way they used to close deals when they were full-time in the game 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Or number 2, a manager, a sales agent, or a buddy sent a script into the company and said, here's what we use, or here's what some of our agents have used. I've even seen some of mine, a version of mine float around companies, and managers literally tell me, yeah, I got this script that I bought and it works really well. And I'm like, let me see it. And then I literally pull up my email from like 4 years before, 5 years before. And I'm like, this one? They're like, how do you have, that's 80% the same. And I'm like, because I was at that company before you came in. That's not fully your script, but I love the things that you've done to it. Looks pretty good. Let's work on it again. Yes. So when it comes to these topics, and please don't think this is a boring topic. You got to get your mind right if you're going to be in these lives with me, because if there's something that's working for other people to help them make money, I don't care if it's 5% more or 500% more, it's worth paying attention to, and this is not complicated. So when I started writing scripts, and I'll read you his DM to me, basically I'll do it right now without mentioning his name. He's in the mortgage business. He's actually working tonight because this is a great time, early evening, to get a hold of people and set your appointments for follow-ups, wives, husbands, that type of thing. And he said, you were coaching blank company a few years ago, and I'm not sure if you knew it at the time, but I had just been starting a family. Basically, he mentioned his 2 children and says that they were struggling financially, and he was bouncing around companies trying to figure out what to do. He was also new in the mortgage industry. And he said, he's mentioning here, it's like, I was so desperate and urgent to make money that I walked into your sessions, that same week, and just began applying it right away. He's like, I didn't have much experience anyway. We've seen this multiple times. Some of you that are in here right now have seen this happen in companies that I've coached. I know George has. I know some of the others here. I'll scroll through the names later. And he's like, how did you, now he's moved on to another office, right? And another company. And he's like, I don't have that anymore. I don't know what happened to it. How the hell do you write these scripts? Well, here's the thing. When you start script writing, you don't want it to be Lisa. Yes, that's right. I just saw your name pop up. Lisa's also one of the individuals who was working for a company that I coached, I think now 6 years ago or so, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. George, yes, sir. George, one of the best managers I've ever had in my life, still to this day, one of the best leaders. And also a director, a general manager at a client of mine a few years ago. Good people. And I'm like, most people are writing scripts based on how they sell. That's totally unfair, because that assumes that the 30, 40, 50, 5 people that you're going to bring on board are going to be able to duplicate the way you sell. And I'm sure there's a lot of standards in the industry too that made a lot of sense that people were using. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, damn, I used to do that too. I used to make that mistake, and I used to try to teach people exactly how I sell. And then you get frustrated of why 80% of your company isn't doing well, and they don't even want to use your script. You're like, follow the script, it works. And everybody, and sometimes the leaders are a little too romantic about the script that they wrote. And although they had good intentions, right? Although they had good intentions for that and wanted to develop the people, wanted the people to do well and make money, hardly any of these people had actually studied communication or behavioral psychology when it came to consumers. So I noticed this way over a decade. I mean, this is like 2010, 11, when I was like, even some of the stuff that I'm writing is starting to become outdated. Outdated meaning it's not working the same anymore. Why is it so difficult for people to learn? So I created a concept called catch-all. And catch-all basically mean I was going to study both what was happening on phone calls with companies, and I was also going to study the psychology or whatever research there was available at that time on that topic. And it wasn't just sales stuff, because I knew if I studied sales stuff that I would probably be just regurgitating the same thing that most people were using in whatever industry I was working on. And you guys know that the mortgage and any type of lending or finance industries have made up for about 50% of my clientele over the past 19 years now, this month being the 19th anniversary. And so, yeah, always got to be willing to evolve, man. Right there, always got to be willing to evolve. And as I'm getting into this, you guys need to know that for over a decade, I was behind the scenes spending a lot more time studying and trying to figure things out and decoding things, listening to phone calls and trying new word tracks, and then seeing if there's any research, not just in business, but any type of psychology or tools that I could use, or experts that spoke on this topic, wrote on this topic, had books on these topics that had to do with understanding how people make decisions. And so I created a catch-all approach. And obviously at that time, I also would have anywhere from 4 to 8 companies at a time working with me and investing in me and their team in order to basically continue to test the stuff out that I was researching and working with them on. And a catch-all approach does 2 things. Number 1, it's written so that sales agents from any experience level, any background, any personality type can use it and flow in their natural character. Okay? There's not a bunch of notes on it. Act this way here, build rapport here, all those things. It's written so that anybody can learn it as long as they practice it consistently for a short time. All right? So it's a catch-all approach. Catch-all also means that, go for it, Jordy. The catch-all also means that it applies to at least 90 to 95% of human behavior. By the way, this approach is also somewhat used when infomercials are written, when politicians' speeches are written, when political campaigns, when news media speaks. They use something similar, they just don't call it that. And it means the way that it's written, based on the fact that the human condition is very programmable and very predictable, it will have a very similar impact on almost all people. Okay, large percentage, which was more than enough in the sales world. And so when you start to write these things, you start to realize that there's a progression to writing sales scripts. Now, here's something that you guys can take down, whether you're watching it right now and you happen to remember that this is live, or whether you're seeing this video later, is every sales call, in person or on the phone, I would break up into 4 or 5 components. 4 or 5 components throughout the call. I would not see it as one long call or pitch or application. I would break it up into 4 or 5 components. And in each of those components, listen carefully, in each of those components, I would start listening with the team members for patterns that are very common in that industry. Meaning, most people in that industry say very similar things, similar questions, similar greetings, even little things like, in case we get disconnected, what's the best number to reach you at? Like even stuff like that. And we would do that in each compartment of the call, still wanting to accomplish the same things, but wanting to find a much more meaningful way to do it. And basically interrupt the pattern that the rest of the industry was using, because we wanted customers to listen to us with a willing state of mind. We didn't want customers to listen to us becoming resistant along the way and sometimes more frustrated or confused on who to choose or what to buy or where to do business, because it became very difficult to differentiate this company from that company based on the language that the sales agent was using. So we would do that in each compartment of the sales call. All right. Yeah, when you use the same language as thousands of other companies, it triggers experiences. That's exactly right. You remember, man, it triggers them to remember experiences they've had before. Now, they're not going to call you out on it. They're not going to necessarily think that collectively and be able to project that to you. Although I've heard that on some phone calls. You sound like everybody else. They'll just listen to you and be like, all right, let me get information. Let me see what the quote is. Let me see what the cost is. And then I'll say the same shit that I say to everybody else, which is, let me think about it, or I'm waiting to hear back from a couple more people, or let me see if I can get a better deal. Or they'll be super cordial, savvy customers. They'll just be like, okay, yeah, I'm walking into the house right now. I got the kids. Can you give me a call Friday afternoon? Just random, they'll spot out random times. Okay, let me call you on Friday afternoon. And that's cool sometimes, but we want high conversion. We want to double and triple conversion ratios. Totally possible. By the way, when it comes to conversion ratios, if the average conversion ratio on qualified business for yourself or in your office is, let's say, 18%, that means, if you're curious enough to look at it this way and strong enough to work on it, that means you are practicing and perfecting repetitively a method that scares off 80% of your qualified customers. And then rewarding. It's energy draining. It causes a revolving door, right? It makes people feel discouraged after a month or two or a couple of years in an industry. Like, I'm putting so much energy in and I'm not getting energy out. Let's circle back. So you break your phone call up into compartments. Now here's the compartments that I use, and I can diagram this in another video. I go the intro section, your basic questions, your discovery area, and or maybe a credit pull, and or maybe getting to know the business. Basically, questions that allow you to get a deeper understanding of what's really happening with the customer. And I often write questions in these tenses. First, questions based on the past. Then, questions in the present. Then, questions in the future. Specifically in that order, but in the context of what would make sense in your industry. Okay? So if I'm working with a homeowner who wants to refinance their home, we would ask about decisions they've made on the home, or why they got into the home, or how long they've been in the home, or how long they planned for it, or what's happened to their finance before getting in, what led to where they are right now. Then we'd ask about the present situation, and then we'd ask some future questions. And this is because when you do that in that order, the customer automatically, the human condition, there's so many different ways I can explain this. So many powerful ways that are not difficult to learn. But it is a human condition, meaning it's already instilled in your DNA and society, that when you ask better and more intelligent, well-sequenced questions that seem to have a path, a sort of yellow brick road, a customer automatically perceives you as more credible and more trustworthy than other people. You don't want your questions scattered all over the call. And then you've got the technical areas. You might have credit that you're looking at. You might have something having to do with their business, or possibly what they're looking for in a home. If you're in real estate, if you're a technology company, you might be asking in the third category of your call, you might be asking about their tech environment or the tools that they're using right now. And the reason I say you want to go in that order is because there's something called order of intimacy. I created order of intimacy as part of something called emotional progression, which means when your questions are in the order of what seems appropriate for how long we've been talking. They have an order to them. By the way, one of the things I studied that had a major impact on me was the art of interrogation. And I studied interrogation for a couple of years, case studies from wars, from the Vietnam War, from all types of things, right? Because interrogation was very good at asking people, starting with basic questions, non-threatening questions, surface level, and gradually increasing the rate or the intimacy, right, of those questions as you go. So that, and there's another study, if you guys want to look it up, it's called the Love Study. I think it's called the Love Study, where they use the same exact sequencing to put two strangers in the same room at a table. And they literally just start going on these questions that are pre-written for them. And a lot of them either end up falling in love or becoming best friends. Some of them want to hug each other. Some of them are crying and sharing stories and so forth. But it's the order of the questions. Obviously, I can't dive into every detail for every single industry right here. But the order of the questions were really, really important in creating a great client experience. Most sales agents spend more time on phone calls talking about what they do, how they can help, how they're different, what value they provide, why their cost is worth it, their irresistible offer, or whatever the case would be. Those things are important, but those things should make up of about 10% of your conversation. The other 90% should be straight interview based, with you transitioning from one section to the other, explaining to the customer briefly why it makes sense to ask the next few questions and to really get to know them. By the way, in doing so very early in the phone call, and this works for pretty much every industry, you want to let the customer know you don't want to see if they're a good fit for your product only. You don't want to see if they qualify. You don't want to see if you have a product for them. The big promise, I call it the big promise in some industries, is that you're going to help them make the right decision, whether it's with you or not. That's the goal. Which brings me to another topic while I'm on this rant. I'll get to that question in a second. Is that getting back to the decision. Most people are writing a sales process. I write the scripts in a decision-making process. So the scripting and the call flows that I write are written from the perspective of what the customer would need to experience in order to feel like it's time to make a decision today. Not what the customer, what information the company, needs in order to see if they qualify, or whatever information they need for their computer, or whatever their company told them to get before they pitch. It's kind of like weird timing. It's like leaning in for the kiss with awkward timing. Y'all know what I mean? Some of y'all need help on that. But anyway, get back into your question. It says, do you think this pattern works because clients are able to relive past experiences, whether good or bad? They can reflect on the present where they can improve. What specifically are you asking me? Triggers motivation for the future. So are you talking about the patterns that exist in a business? Or are you talking about changing the patterns and what impact that has, what positive impact that has on the customer? Fill me in, type in a few more notes here and I'll clarify for you. All right. So I want to get to that point because there's a bunch of great closes that we use, and they're not really pitches or closes. They're helping a customer to identify the facts that are involved in making a decision, and then explaining to the customer, telling the customer it is going to be a good decision for you, and then being able to explain many of the reasons and facts on their side of the table on why it's a good decision, and asking if they understand and if they are in alignment with you, if they are on the same page with you. So the entire phone call is basically a good quality interview with the big promise that the only way you're going to sign anything, pay anything, enroll anything, or make a decision today is if we can both agree that this seems like the right decision for you, and if we can deliver what it is that you really need. Otherwise, you may need to check with somebody else. When you do that stuff earlier in the phone call, and you're not just saying, I'd like to get your information, ask a few questions, see what we can do for you, put together a couple of options. Those are all sales patterns. They're not going to crush your business, but you definitely ain't going to have no doubling and tripling of your conversion ratio starting a phone call like that. So he says the past, present, and future questions. Okay, so question sequencing. Think about you wanting to help somebody with something. And in order to help them, you have to ask questions in a certain order in order to make them, number one, feel comfortable with your questions, and number two, to expose the truth about questions. Okay? Let me give you guys an example, and I'll use the mortgage business. It's an easy one, top of mind for me. A lot of times when a customer gets on a phone call and they want to lower their payments, they want to lower their rates, or they got a quote, or they got an offer, or they got a text message from someone, or they want to buy a house, and they're rate shopping. I get it. But what's really happening is if the sales agent finds out that they really can't do anything more for them, okay, they really can't do much else for them, then they'll simply ask them, well, do you need any cash? Do you have any home improvement projects coming up? Do you need money for your savings? Do you have any interest rates you want to consolidate? And they'll be asking them that because in the first 3 minutes, they kind of found out, well, I can't really deliver the goal that you want. So they're just bluntly asking these questions. I'm like, if you ask those questions, the customer knows that you're asking those questions, which are going to take their loan amounts up, take their fees up, and they're going to have to trade in their rates. And now they're piling all these other bills, or getting even more cash out of their equity. And in often cases, the equity is the only type of savings they still have. I'm like, you're leaning in for the kiss too soon. And so when they ask those questions are a sales pattern. Okay? So past, present, future. So one of the past questions that we may ask without implying that we might recommend them pulling out some cash or paying off bills is like, have you been able to set aside a significant amount of money over the past 1 to 2 years? Do you have assets is a common question, but have you been able to set aside money over the past couple of years? And if so, about how much? Because they're applying for a loan. So it makes sense. Now, they know I can verify this information eventually if I need to, bank statements, etc. But when you ask a question like that, not in the very beginning of your phone call, we usually do this after the basic questions: property, income, employment, payments, interest rates, stuff like that. But when you ask that, if the customer says, well, no, it's been difficult, we haven't been able to, but we've got about 3,000. Now the customer's identified that they have a cash flow problem, and they're in a bit of a danger zone, which is probably why all of a sudden they're willing to talk to a stranger randomly about lowering their mortgage payment. Only 5 to 10% of people do it just because they're curious about getting a lower rate. Most people do it because they need relief, cash relief, financial relief, or some type of breathing room or leverage in their life. They feel like they're losing control. So, and then we might ask about the present questions and then future questions. But asking them, have you been able to? Or how long has this been going on for? Or how long have you been looking for something like this? Or how long, how much time has gone by where you've been seeing the same thing in your business? 1 year, I know you mentioned you've been in business for 4 or 5 years now. How long has it been that you've been noticing this? By the way, time is more influential than money. People hate losing time more than they hate losing money. And I think it's because they feel like there's a way to replenish money, but there's not a way to replenish time. All right. Moving on, there's a handful of you in here right now, so hopefully this is helpful. And then reposting these things, I know it'll take a while and so forth, but we'll get it rocking. No big deal. And so forth. So the scripting part that I wanted to focus on today comes down to this. There's no, muscular, forceful close. There's 3 to 5 really, really effective closes that I teach, and then there's all types of plugins to them. But 80% of the customer's decision on whether or not they're even willing to take your advice doesn't happen when you're pitching them on pricing or their options or the product. 80% of the decision on whether or not they're willing to take any advice or move forward with you or your company comes from what they've experienced up until the point where you're pitching them. That is one of the reasons why many of the dozens and dozens of call flows that I've helped write for companies have done so well. It's because a lot of what we teach focuses on making sure the intake, the origination part of that conversation or conversations, depending what industry, is so well tuned, is so well sequenced, it eliminates most of the cliche patterns in their business. And then both the customer and the sales agent arrive at a point through the realizations and the respect that was built during the conversation. They both arrive at the point of decision at the same time. And the customer starts to realize, I feel more comfortable taking whatever recommendations or actions you want me to take simply because of what I experienced during our conversation. I can tell that the timing of things, the structure of the way you handle the conversation, I can tell you're very good at what you do. I can tell you've done this many times simply because of the quality of the conversation and the sort of interview that you had with me while helping me to figure out whether or not this is something for me to consider right now or not. All right? And we'll literally spend about 6 to 8 weeks just working on that together, rolling it out piece by piece, practicing it, listening to calls as a group from time to time before we get anywhere near the pitch and training on the pitch. And what happens is very magical with not the whole company, but a significant number of sales agents is a lot of their numbers will already start to grow up. They'll go up because of those things, because they're what I call becoming the one. They're becoming the person very, very quickly. They're earning that respect mainly and that trust that is needed in order for this customer to take any consultative advice from you, especially if it's something that they're not used to doing, different than what they've already done many times, or something that they've done for the first time, whether it be in their personal life or their business. Now, while we're on that topic, and we're pumping this out later on, I want to mention there are some things that can block any call flow, any type of gold bars that I carry into a company that have already proven to make millions. There is something that can block, and that is the leadership team's flexibility and willingness to create a phalanx and all work together, patiently together, no overnight results, but also aggressively in our reinforcement, aggressively in our demonstration, aggressively when there's whispers around a company or people are not all management is synced up and kind of like we all have our ups and downs and you should all question things, especially when you're learning new things. But when the leadership team does not form a phalanx, it takes much longer. And of course, doesn't mean bad people. It's also part of the human condition that I see all the time in the business world. And it takes a combination of mentorship, open communication, nourishing, building respect with each other, reinforcing, and sometimes me having to literally walk in and demonstrate certain things that and how they will go in order to force the results in that company or on that team. Because once you get enough evidence that it's working, then the growth happens much quicker. And I'll tell whether it's one sales agent or an entire company. Today I was working with 5 companies. From any companies that have anywhere from 30 sales agents all the way up to 500 sales agents. And I'm like, be careful, because right when you start to make progress, right when you start to see it's about to explode, that part right there is where a lot of people will become resistant, because when you start to provide the tools, the training, the environment, the marketing, the systems, the reports, the accountability, when you start to provide the tools, it organically raises accountability. So there's going to be a little pressure in the company. And when it really starts to work, people will bark back at you, because it means now they're going to have to raise their standards and they're going to have to start to adapt. Or as production goes up, they're going to be singled out. They're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And some of them have massive potential. I understand these things, and you should too. So if you're pushing through things yourself as an individual, or you're working with an entire team, you have to hold strong, hold your posture. It's all about being respectful to your team, communicating. You're not there to write people up. Don't focus on people when they're doing something wrong. Focus on people. Try to catch people when they're doing the things right. Don't use them against each other. This guy over here did 4 deals. What did you do? Don't use them against each other. in a group format, explain, we're going to do this together. And we're going to highlight the people that are using, practicing, have the activity levels that we want, and showcase the results, because we want to use that to inspire other people to do the same. And once we push past that period, which in most cases for me, it's anywhere from 90 to 120 days, because it's a company, right? It's not just one or two people. And so there's cultural things to go through together. But once we get past that 90 to 120 days, that's when we start to see a lot of people start to just bam, 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 bam. And I'm getting emails right now of something similar that I'm doing with a company that's actually here locally. And it's magical. And the biggest paycheck that you can take for yourself, or even for me, is progress. That you know your time is not being wasted. I know there's a lot of times in our careers and other seasons where we become exhausted with putting energy and effort into something and not seeing the rewards that you want in a reasonable amount of time. It gets exhausting, and then people start bouncing around. So for those of you who listen to this and have gotten some quick takeaways, you can go and start working on these things alone if you want. You can start experimenting. What do people say in my industry? Well, why don't I just say that differently and make it a little bit more natural for the customer and not so salesy? How do people greet people in my industry? I've got some videos where I make fun of retail, I make fun of mortgage. I'm like, you guys all say the same thing, and then you wonder why 70% of your customers are like procrastinating, can't make a decision, no thanks, I'm just looking, whatever the case may be. So you could start looking for patterns in your industry and just ask yourself, how many people in my industry say this? How many people in my industry probably use the same exact question? How many people in my industry will probably pull credit exactly the same way? How many people in my industry start their phone call off with these same similar sentences? And although you can't replace all of it, some of it has to stay. In some industries, it's for compliance reasons that has to stay. But you can begin working on some of that yourself and on your own. Speaking your language, good. Let's do this. Even if while I'm doing these lives, you guys have to admit it takes some patience on my end to go from an environment where, I'm working with hundreds of people a week together and we're plowing forward and hands-on, to going over to a platform like Instagram or now YouTube and so forth, where that computer system, that algorithm doesn't care how long you've been a coach for or how many people you've impacted. It takes momentum. You got to be consistent. And so I'm having to okay, let's do this and see how it goes. And I'll do my best to light you guys up with value on any topics. Now, I am going to ask for those of you that are still here, and I'll chop this up with my editing team lately. And there's so many projects we're working on for the highlights. But I did start the new channel, Stronger, Smarter, Richer, which is a combination of teaching videos from myself. There's a couple of good ones up right now that have changed my career and many others. And also me interviewing other successful people in a typical podcast fashion, but I kind of like to dig in and ask hard questions and put them on the spot, and looking for things that are beyond just the typical podcast type advice. And we've got some great guests on there so far. So if you guys want to go check that out, that would help, because the first 6 to 12 months in doing these things online are challenging. They take a lot of work, a lot of time, money, and effort. And so if you guys want to support some of those channels, just subscribe to the Instagram, Stronger, Smarter, Richer. Go ahead, Stronger, Smarter, Richer Show. Just type it in with a period in between each word. It'll pop up. There's also a link on this profile. And then you've got the Stronger, Smarter, Richer Show on YouTube. You can also type in Joe Coach SSR as the handle. DM if you have questions for next week. If you guys have my email address, which I won't give out now because email gets crazy, okay? And I don't want to miss it, but the DM thing seems to be working. That was a big one. I'm happy to help you with this stuff, guys. There's no fee. I don't have anything to pitch you in here. My business is mainly B2B. My income for the past 20 years has solely come from coaching and consulting from companies that are willing to work together and invest in the people, level up their game. I'm going to sign off for everybody that's jumped on here. I appreciate you guys. Enjoy your evening. Go grab some dinner, relax, recharge, pray, and I'll talk to you guys later next week. Cheers.